Welcome once again to Bio 211D, Plant Physiology, Unit 4, Session 1, Bioenergetics. And by the end of this session, students should be able to explain bioenergetics, state the importance of bioenergetics in living organisms, state the laws of thermodynamics, explain the quantities that describe energy changes, and explain how cells acquire free energy. So metabolism is a highly coordinated cellular activity in which many metabolic pathways catalyzed by enzymes cooperate to 1. Obtain chemical energy by capturing solar energy or degrading energy-rich nutrients from the environment. 2. Convert nutrient molecules into the cell's own characteristic molecules, including precursors of macromolecules. 3. Polymerize monomeric precursors, building blocks, into macromolecules such as proteins, nucleic acids, and polysaccharides. And 4. Synthesize and degrade biomolecules required for specialized cellular functions such as membrane, lipids, intracellular messengers, and pigments. So metabolism, living organism can be divided into two large groups as being 1. Autotrophs such as photosynthetic bacteria and vascular plants, which can use carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as their sole source of carbon from which they construct all their carbon-containing biomolecules. And 2. Heterotrophs, which cannot use atmospheric carbon dioxide and must obtain carbon from their environment in the form of complex organic molecules, such as glucose. In other words, heterotrophs depend on autotrophic organisms for nutrients. So examples of heterotrophs are multicellular animals, that's humans inclusive, and most microorganisms. So since autotrophic cells and organisms can synthesize their own organic biomolecules, they are relatively self-sufficient compared to heterotrophic cells and organisms, which must subsist on the products of other organisms. Many autotrophic organisms are photosynthetic and obtain their energy from sunlight, whereas heterotrophic organisms obtain their energy from the degradation of organic nutrients produced by autotrophs. Do you now understand why autotrophs are referred to as producers, while heterotrophs are called consumers? Autotrophs and heterotrophs live together in a vast interdependent cycle in which autotrophic organisms use atmospheric carbon dioxide to build their organic biomolecules, some of them generating oxygen from water in the process, as well as we shall see later in the carbon cycle. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, use the organic products of autotrophs as nutrients and return carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Some of the oxidation reactions that produce carbon dioxide also consume oxygen, converting it to water. Thus, carbon, oxygen, and water are constantly cycled between the heterotrophic and autotrophic worlds, with solar energy as the driving force for this global process. What then is metabolism? Metabolism is the sum of all the chemical transformations taking place in a cell or organism. Occurs through a series of enzyme catalyzed reactions that constitute metabolic pathways. Each of the consecutive steps in a metabolic pathway brings about a specific small chemical change. These chemical changes usually involves the removal, transfer, or addition of a particular atom or functional group. The precursor is converted into a product through a series of metabolic intermediates called metabolites. The term intermediary metabolism is often applied to the combined activities of all the metabolic pathways that interconvert precursors metabolites and products of low molecular weight. That's molecular weight is less than 1000. Metabolism is made up of catabolism and anabolism. Catabolism is the degradative or breakdown phase of metabolism in which organic nutrient molecules such as carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are converted into smaller, simpler end products such as lactic acid, carbon dioxide, and ammonia. Catabolic pathways release energy, some of which is conserved in the formation of ATP and reduce electron carriers such as NADH, NADPH, and FADH2. The rest is lost as heat. Has anything ring a bell here? By now, you should understand that respiration is a catabolic process. Anabolism. In anabolism, also called biosynthesis, small, simple precursors are built up into larger and more complex molecules, including lipids, polysaccharides, proteins, and nucleic acids. Anabolic reactions require an input of energy, generally in the form of the phosphoryl group transfer potential of ATP and the reducing power of NADH, NADPH, and FADH2. This also informs us that photosynthesis is an anabolic process. Definition of bioenergetics. All living cells constantly perform work. The cells in your body work so that you live. They require energy for maintaining their highly organized structures, synthesizing cellular components, generating electric currents, and many other processes. The quantitative study of energy relationships and its conversions in biological systems is referred to as bioenergetics. That is, bioenergetics is the quantitative study of energy relationships and energy conversions in biological systems. Here, we shall not go into details about the computations. All living organisms require energy for movement, growth, synthesis of biomolecules, and the transport of ions and molecules across membranes. Living organisms must acquire their energy from their surroundings. The energy acquired must be utilized efficiently to carry out life processes as those enumerated above. To study such bioenergetics phenomena requires an understanding of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics allows us to determine whether chemical processes and reactions occur spontaneously or naturally. So, basic concept of thermodynamics. You might have heard about a system of surroundings, but then what are they? In any consideration of thermodynamics, we need to distinguish between the system and the surroundings. The system is that portion of the universe with which we are concerned. It could be a mixture of chemicals in a test tube, or a single cell, or an entire organism. If it is a single, then the universe is the entire body of the organism. The surroundings include everything else in the universe. All systems are not the same, hence we have different types of systems. There are three basic kinds of systems. These are isolated, closed, and open systems. An isolated system cannot exchange matter or energy with its surroundings. A closed system may exchange energy but not matter with the surroundings. That is, for a closed system, energy can be exchanged with the surroundings, but it does not exchange matter with the surroundings. Having seen the nature of the isolated and closed systems, what would an open system be? An open system may exchange matter, energy, or both with the surroundings. Living organisms are typically open systems that exchange matter and energy with their surroundings. We all eat food, drink water, or defecate. This is an exchange of matter with our surroundings. What other things do human beings and other living organisms exchange with their surroundings? Biological energy transformations obey the laws of thermodynamics. What are the laws of thermodynamics? We shall look at them here. You would have learned from physics and physical chemistry that heat could be converted into other forms of energy. Moreover, physics and physical chemistry teach us that all forms of energy could ultimately be transformed or converted from one form to another. The first law of thermodynamics states that the total energy of an isolated system is conserved. The first law is the principle of the conservation of energy. For any physical or chemical change, the total amount of energy in the universe remains constant. Energy may change form, or it may be transported from one region to another, but it cannot be created or destroyed. The second law of thermodynamics has been described and expressed in different ways, some of which are: 1. A system tends to proceed from an ordered state to a disordered state. The entropy of a system plus surroundings is unchanged by reversible processes. The entropy of a system plus surroundings increases for irreversible processes. All naturally occurring processes proceed toward equilibrium, that is, to state of minimum potential energy. So we can see that from the statements of the second law of thermodynamics that entropy is implicated. Entropy is a measure of disorder or randomness of a system or the surroundings. An organized or ordered state is low entropy state, whereas a disorganized state is high entropy state. All things being equal, reactions involving large positive entropy changes are more likely to occur than those for which entropy is not large and positive. The second law of thermodynamics, which can also be stated that the universe always tends towards increasing disorder. In all natural processes, the entropy of the universe increases. Living organisms consist of collections of molecules much more highly organized than the surrounding materials from which they are constructed. Living organisms also maintain and produce order, apparently unmindful to the second law of thermodynamics. When you are eating, respiring, or performing any activity, you do not think about the second law of thermodynamics, do you? We simply do not. However, living organisms do not violate the second law. Instead, they operate strictly within it. To discuss the application of the second law to biological systems, we must first define those systems and their surroundings. A reacting system is a collection of matter that is undergoing a particular chemical or physical process. It may be an organism, a cell, or two reacting compounds as stated earlier. The reacting system and its surroundings together constitute the universe. Now, you understand what a universe means. This is totally different from the geographical universe. In the laboratory, some chemical or physical processes can be carried out in isolated or closed systems, in which no material or energy is exchanged with the surroundings. Living cells and organisms, however, are open systems, constantly exchanging both material and energy with their surroundings. Living systems are never at equilibrium with their surroundings, and the constant transactions between systems and surroundings explain how organisms can create order within themselves while operating within the second law of thermodynamics. The third law of thermodynamics states that the entropy of a crystalline, perfectly ordered substance must approach zero as the temperature approaches 0 Kelvin, and at temperature of 0 Kelvin, entropy is exactly 0. There are three thermodynamic quantities that describe the energy changes occurring in a chemical reaction. These are as follows. 1. Gibbs free energy, which expresses the amount of energy capable of doing work during a reaction at constant temperature and pressure. When a reaction proceeds with the release of free energy, the free energy change has a negative value and the reaction is said to be exergonic. In endergonic reactions, the system gains free energy and Gibbs free energy is positive. Enthalpy, which is the heat content of the reacting system. Enthalpy reflects the number and kinds of chemical bonds in the reactants and products. When a chemical reaction releases heat, it is said to be exothermic. Thus, the heat content of the product is less than that of the reactants, and change in enthalpy has by convention a negative value. Reacting systems that take up heat from their surroundings are endothermic and have positive value of change in enthalpy. Entropy S, which is a quantitative expression for the randomness or disorder in a system. When the products of a reaction are less complex and more disordered than the reactants, the reaction is said to proceed with a gain in entropy. The units of change in Gibbs and enthalpy are joules or mole or calories per mole. Please note that 1 calorie is equal to 4.184 joules. The units of entropy are joules, mole, Kelvin, or joule per mole or per Kelvin. Under the conditions existing in biological systems, changes in free energy, enthalpy, and entropy are related to each other quantitatively by the equation change in G, that is Gibbs free energy, giving us change in enthalpy minus change in Ts. In the equation, change in G is the change in Gibbs free energy of the reacting system. Change in H is the change in enthalpy of the system. T is the absolute temperature. K and S is the change in entropy of the system. That's by convention. Change in S, that's entropy of the system, has a positive sign when entropy increases, and change in H has a negative sign when heat is released by the system to its surroundings. Either of these conditions, which are typical of favorable processes, tends to make change in G negative. In fact, change in G of a spontaneously reacting system is always negative. The second law of thermodynamics states that the entropy of the universe increases during all chemical and physical processes, but it does not require that the entropy increase should take place in the reacting system itself. The order produced within living cells as they grow and divide is more than compensated for by the disorder they create in their surroundings in the course of growth and division. That is precisely, living organisms preserve their internal order by taking from their surroundings free energy in the form of nutrients or sunlight and returning to their surroundings an equal amount of energy as heat and entropy. Sources of free energy for cells. Cells are isothermal systems. In other words, they function at essentially constant temperature. Thus, heat flow is not a source of energy for cells, since heat can do work only as it passes to a zone or object at a lower temperature. The energy that cells can and must use is free energy, described by the Gibbs free energy function, which allows prediction of the direction of chemical reactions, their exact equilibrium position, and the amount of work they can perform, theoretically, at constant temperature and pressure. Heterotrophic cells acquire free energy from nutrient molecules, and photosynthetic cells acquire it from absorbed solar radiation. Both kinds of cells transform this free energy into ATP and other rich compounds capable of providing energy for biological work at constant temperature and pressure. Now you can understand how bioenergetics is related to respiration and photosynthesis. So in review, this is by no means a detailed discussion of bioenergetics and thermodynamics. However, it has provided you with the basics to build on from our discussion so far. And we can state that living cells constantly perform work. They require energy for maintaining their highly organized structures, synthesizing cellular components, generating electric currents, reproduction, and many other processes. Bioenergetics is the quantitative study of energy relationships and energy conversions in biological systems. Biological energy transformations obey the laws of thermodynamics, even though living organisms may be unconscious of the laws of thermodynamics. All chemical reactions are influenced by two forces: the tendency to achieve the most stable bonding state and the tendency to achieve the highest degree of randomness expressed as entropy. The net driving force in a reaction is the change in G, the free entropy change, which represents the net effect of these two factors. That's change in G equals the change in enthalpy minus the temperature and change in entropy. When G is large and negative, the reaction goes more in the forward direction. When G is large and positive, the reaction tends to go in the reverse direction. And then when G is zero, the system is at equilibrium. We explained that bioenergetics is all about its importance to organisms and the laws of thermodynamics that underpin it, the quantities that describe energy changes and how cells acquire free energy.